na mat wa'ta. Welcome, welcome back to the homelands, the ancestral and treaty homelands of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people, guaranteed to them through the 1851 Peace Treaty. I rather am envious of the Hinanaena who still live in this area, their beautiful homeland. You know, I am standing up here and I am thinking of something called blood memory. Blood memory, memories that are in one's blood. You can't remove them. Our histories and our experiences are our own. And there's also blood guilt. Guilt, the result of bloodshed. I believe those are the two things that we are wanting to address at this conference that has paid special attention and honored my ancestors who were so horribly massacred and mutilated on that very cold November 29th day in 1864. Blood memory, blood guilt. Blood guilt comes around from the fact that the man that led the charge on this peaceful encampment was a clergyman of the Methodist Church, John Milton Shevington. The then governor of the territory was John Evans, another Methodist. And this continues to be a part of what we remember with honor and with great love. We were, as a people, given our ways by a powerful man with special talent who came to as far back in our history as a people. And he lived with us, it is said, 4 long lifetimes of a person. And as he was going to leave us from around the vicinity of this very sacred mountain, Noah was the hill that gives, he gave some sad predictions of our future as a peoples. He said that there would be light-skinned people with fair hair and blue eyes who would come to us from the east, and that they would bring different ways with them. And he said that these people would want our land and that there would be wars. He also said that these people, whom we call Vi'il, means the spider people, the spider white people, would want to take our children and educate them. And those they educated would not know anything, and that we were to say no. We were told to not give up our flesh. This powerful individual that we know as a prophet is sweet medicine. And true to his predictions, there were those strangers who came to our shores. And the pilgrims came, and they were the first ones, among the first to arrive here, and they were fleeing religious persecution. The persecution of the way they prayed, of a way they looked at the world, their entire belief systems, their spiritual ways as a people, which we also believe. It seems as those that were fleeing their homelands for religious persecution forgot that experience when they came here. And wanted to make us Christians, which is good, but not to the exclusion of our ways as a people. And these pilgrims, fleeing religious persecution in those first winters at Plymouth, were assisted by some indigenous men, honorable men, Samoset, Squanto, Massasoit, without whom they would never have survived here on our homelands that we call a motherland. So time went on. And true to Sweet Medicine's predictions, as manifest destiny became a policy of the United States of America, and those that came here were going to settle this continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Manifest destiny, a political motivator to settling our homelands. Never mind that we lived in those interiors. And because we lived in our homelands, we were called obstacles to progress, whatever progress was. So they overspread the continent, but somewhere in around 1848, gold was discovered here in the Pikes Peak region. And Sweet Medicine said that these people would be looking for that gold medal that was in many places here on earth, and that it would make them crazy. Pikes Peak was a place where gold was discovered here in this state. And so these people then came, brought diseases with them, for which we had no natural immunity because we never had them. We were decimated by such diseases as smallpox, measles, whooping cough, tuberculosis, which certainly helped to depopulate the indigenous population of this country. And in 1869, President Ulysses S. Grant came to office, wanted to implement a more humane policy, and instituted his peace policy. Under the peace policy, the various Christian denominations were to be responsible for Indian affairs on reservations, and they were to appoint Indian agents. But in the meantime, before that, because gold had been discovered here in this state that we love and will continue to love and will always love, we were pushed around from one place to another. There was one of the chiefs that said, "The great white father moves us around so much, why does he not just put us on wheels?" And the 1871 peace treaty government had ceased the policy of peacemaking in 1871. We were guaranteed through treaty the ownership as Cheyenne and Arapahoes of the Eastern Front, the entire Eastern Front of the Rocky Mountains. A piece of real estate so huge that it straddles some portions of the 4 states of Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. So that gold that makes people crazy resulted in a great deal of displacement. And Territorial Governor John Evans sent out a proclamation that those Indian peoples who wanted to be at peace and to declare themselves friendly would report to the nearest military forts. And so Black Kettle, the left hand, took their band's hand, surrendered at Fort Lyons, were told to camp at Sand Creek. And we know what happened that cold November morning. As Robert Benton said, it was so cold that the blood froze on their bodies. Very thankfully, there are individuals like Captain Silas Soule and Lieutenant Joseph Kramer, who retained their sense of compassion and moral ethics. We honor them today. But the butchery that occurred there defies human imagination. I could go on and list them for you, but suffice it to say that there was a pregnant woman who had her body cut open and she was dead, had been shot. And the fetus that she was carrying was ripped from her body and scalped. One little boy toddling down the banks of Sand Creek, in the valley of Sand Creek, was used as target practice by soldiers. One tried, missed; the other obviously ridiculed him, shot, missed, and then a third man came along and he said, "I'll show you how to shoot and kill that little SOB." And he fired, and the little boy, about 3 years of age, fell. The kind of mutilation resulted in many of the human body parts being paraded into Denver City, as it was then called, and put on public display in a theater in that town. That is blood memory for us, and that is blood guilt. Our children were sent to those schools just as our prophet said. They today are beginning to forget their languages, which are on the verge of extinction. The Hinano-Aina language and the Tzitzis language. And it's sad. There was a man in California named Ishi who was the last of the Yana people. And he lived in a museum. It's horrible for me to imagine the fact that he had no one to talk to. There was no one to speak with him in his language. I certainly do not want to see that be the case of our indigenous languages, our languages given us here by our Creator when we were placed here and told how to live. And then, like this great prophet of ours, Sweet Medicine, said our children were taken and put into those schools, so that today we can say that the church and the state work together to eradicate our cultures, our languages, and our ways of life. The first 300 years of Indian education sought to assimilate us through Christianity and civilization. The kind of devastation that we experienced at Sand Creek left us essentially in a cultural wasteland, the effects of which are intergenerational. But nothing was has been done. The United States federal government has even refused to pay the reparations that were to be given us in the Treaty of the Little Arkansas of 1865. I sit here as one of those who is a survivor of these beautiful people. And I think, why can't we get the kind of assistance to rebuild our nations in the way that the Marshall Plan was enacted to rebuild war-torn Europe, which cost the United States of America $13 billion to bring democracy to the world because we wanted to be a superpower. We need an Indian Marshall Plan so that we can rebuild our nations. And one of the ways that we are rebuilding our nation as Tzitzis and the Hinano-Ana is through the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribal College. I'm an old workhorse in education. I am Professor Emeritus from Montana State University and lived for 37 years among my kinsmen, the Northern Cheyenne, before I went home, because it was important for me to go back. And in my one